This is actress Miss Barbara Stanwyck, often called Missy by her friends. She was beloved in Hollywood for her unpretentious manner. She maintained lasting friendships with actors, crew alike, remembering the names of their husbands, wives, and even their children. One of her closest friends was Western star Joel McCrea and his wife Frances D. Barbara was born Ruby Catherine Stevens in Brooklyn, New York on July the 16th, 1907. She once said that her real name, Ruby Stevens, sounded like a stripper, where Barbara Stanwyck sounds like a leading lady. Ruby was the youngest of 5 children, 3 girls, Laura, Viola, and Maud, and 1 brother, Brian. Her parents were Brian E. Stevens and Catherine Ann Stevens. Everyone called Catherine Ann Kitty. Now, this is the Stevens family in 1901, before Barbara and her brother Brian was born. On the left is Mildred, Mabel, and Maud. Kitty and Brian had had some problems. He left her and the 3 teenage girls, but Kitty traced him down and talked him into coming back. On July the 29th, 1911, when Ruby was only 4 years old, her mother was killed while riding on a New York streetcar when a drunk kicked her and she fell off the moving car. Catherine was 8 months pregnant, and complications of the miscarriage caused the loss of her life by septic poisoning. Ruby and Brian was with their mother and saw her fall. 2 weeks after Catherine's death, her dad left for a job working on the Panama Canal and was never seen by the family again. Records show that Brian E. Stevens passed away on the 5th of June, 1919, 8 years after leaving his children, while he was traveling to New York on the SS Advance. He was buried at sea at the age of 56. Now this is a picture of the SS Advance traveling through the Panama Canal in 1914. Ruby and her 6-year-old brother, Malcolm Bryan Jr., will go to live with her 2 older sisters, who pass them around, and finally they will be in over 12 different foster homes. Eventually she'll be separated from Brian, which was devastating. He had been her closest friend. Years later, Stanwyck said that they were in as many as 4 foster homes in 1 year. She didn't like the homes and often tried running away. During the summer months of 1916, when Ruby was 9 years old, her sister Mildred, who was working as a showgirl, decided to take her on tour with her. Ruby loved it and would try and learn her sister's routine backstage. That wasn't all Ruby was learning. She started smoking at the age of 9 and will smoke all but 4 years of her life. From the ages of 12 to 14, she was living with Maud, one of her sisters, and her family in Brooklyn. By the time Ruby was 14, she had quit school and went to work. First at a department store wrapping packages. Then she became a file clerk for a Brooklyn telephone office. At $14 a week, she was on her own and independent. She had once tried a job cutting dress patterns out for Vogue magazine. Customers complained about her work, and they fired me, she said. In 1922, it's believed at the age of 15, Ruby was on her own and vulnerable, received a botched abortion that left her unable to have children. The next year at 16, she auditioned for the chorus line at the Strand Roof, a nightclub over the Strand Theater in Times Square. During this time, she may have danced as a Ziegfeld girl for a short time. She also taught and performed dancing at Texas Guinness nightclubs. In 1926, Barbara Stanwyck, still being called Ruby Stevens, got a part in a Broadway play called The Noose. It was written by William Mack. The play opened on October the 20th, 1926, at the Hudson Theater. It introduced Barbara Stanwyck to the public. The play was a hit and run for over 200 performances. The writer, William Mack, suggested that she changed her name from Ruby Stevens. Her co-star was a well-established actor by the name of Rex Cherryman. The much younger Barbara fell head over heels, hopelessly in love with the married man. In 1927, Stanwyck would star in Burlesque, the role that made a Broadway star out of Barbara Stanwyck. Her romance was still going on with Rex Cherryman. When Cherryman fell ill in the early part of 1928, his doctors advised him to take a sea voyage. Barbara and Rex had planned to have a secret rendezvous in Paris once he arrived in France. Unfortunately, Rex Cherryman had contracted septic poisoning on the voyage and passed away shortly after arriving. He was 31 years old. Barbara was devastated by Rex's death. She was later introduced to vaudeville comedian Frank Fay by a mutual friend, Oscar Levitt. At first, they didn't like one another. However, after Cherryman's death, Fay became attentive and showed concern for Barbara. A romance began and the two married August 26, 1928. Barbara was 21 and Frank was 35. He was a well-established and influential actor, and she was still just getting started with her career. Fay was known for his displeasing attitude to others, while Barbara was known for her pleasant attitude and work ethics. The couple moved from the stage in the East to movies in the West in 1929. After arriving in Los Angeles, they rented this house at 707 North Arden Drive. Stanwyck's career initially failed to get off the ground, and so she occupied herself by being a housewife. Frank was happy being the successful star of the two. But when he realized how unhappy his wife was, not being able to act, he helped her win a part in Frank Cappell's Lady of Leisure. The 1930 movie starred Barbara Stanwyck as a party girl and model that was hired by an upper-crust artist, played by Ralph Graves, where a romance soon developed.
No, only I'd like to finish the job I started.
Is that all?
What do you mean, is that all?
Well, I mean, what difference does it make whether you do finish it? Who cares? It'll be just another painting. The museum is full of paintings.
Now, look here, Miss
Miss Arnold, can't you call me Kay? What am I, a statue or a hunk of furniture? That's the way you treat me. I'm a human being.
The movie's director, Frank Kappa, helped launch Barbara Stanwyck's film career by getting her a contract with Poverty Rose Columbia Pictures. When he first interviewed Stanwyck, he said that she'll never do because she's not pretty enough. When Frank Fay, her husband, persuaded him to let her perform one of her scenes that she did on the stage, he was convinced she could act. Kappa and Barbara will make several movies together, and years later he will say of Stanwyck, "In a Hollywood popularity contest, Missy would win hands down." She was known for being kind and helpful to everyone. Kappa said that she was loved by all the directors, actors, crews, and extras, often helping crew members financially. Marilyn Monroe claimed that Barbara was the only actress of the older generation that was good to her. Director Jacques Tourneur said that Missy lived for two things, and both was to work. She believed if she worked coming out of her background, no one needed a handout from the government. On May the 7th, 1931, Barbara lost her oldest sister, Laurel, from a sudden heart attack. She's buried at the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. Laurel Mildred was 45 years old. Stanwyck had already lost another sister, Mabel Christine, in 1930 at the age of 40. On December the 5th, 1932, Barbara and Frank Fay adopted a son, Anthony Dion Fay, nicknamed Tony. Tony was 10 months old at the time. And the next year in 1933, Barbara was in two excellent movies. First, it was Babyface with George Brent. From the time that Lily, played by Stanwyck, was a young lady, she had been sexually exploited by her dad's male customers in his speakeasy.
Yeah, I'm a tramp, and who's to blame? My father. A swell start you gave me. Nothing but men, dirty, rotten men, and you're lower than any of them. I'll hate you as long as I live.
After his death, Lily had learned to exploit men and get what she wanted, driving them to murder and suicide through jealousy. She became friends with an African-American woman named Chico, played by Thelma Harris. They moved to the city where Lily had more opportunity to meet men that she could take advantage of without remorse. No matter how bad things got, she always was able to take care of Chico. Barbara Stanwyck's portrayal of Lily is considered one of her best. Also in 1933, Barbara starred with Nels Astor in The Bitter Tea of General Yin. She plays a missionary in Shanghai during the Chinese Civil War when she becomes involved with a Chinese warlord, General Yin, played by Astor. It was directed by one of Stanwyck's favorite directors, Frank Kappa. During this time, Barbara's career was climbing, while her husband, Frank Faze, was failing. He began drinking and becoming abusive to his wife and son. She was caught in a cycle of abuse that she didn't know how to get out of. Faye had become dismissive and unpleasant to everyone. It's been said that the movie A Star is Born was actually inspired by the story of Barbara Stanwyck and Frank Faye. Stanwyck said that her friends Zeppo Marx of the Marx Brothers and his wife Marion helped her survive and encouraged her to leave Faye. During a drinking bout, Faye throws their young son Dion into the swimming pool. That was when she got the courage to leave. Barbara gained custody of Dion and divorced Frank Faye in 1935. Frank Faye was the first stand-up comedian and was recognized as a comic pioneer. After his divorce from Stanwyck, he continued his downhill spiral by drinking constantly. However, in 1944, Faye was picked to have a lead role in Broadway's play as Elwood Dowd in Harvey, whose friend is an invisible rabbit. He continued drinking and again lost everything. 1 week before Frank's death in 1961, he entered the St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. He was deemed legally incompetent. Frank Faye has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for motion pictures and radio. He was 69 years old. Also in 1935, Stanwyck was starred with Preston Foster in the story of Annie Oakley. Instead of following the career of Annie Oakley, the movie mainly deals with the love story of Annie and Toby Walker, played by Foster.
Now you really got me.
I got you.
You sure have, Eddie. No other girl's got a chance.
The movie comes out 9 years after the death of the real Annie Oakley. For several years after the divorce, Frank Faye stayed in contact with his son, but as time went by, their relationship faded. Stanwyck doted on Dion for years, but decided that she didn't want him to be a spoiled Hollywood kid, so she sent him finally to military school. While at military school, Dion wanted to add the name Antonio. Stanwyck gave her permission. He then called himself Tony. In 1951, Tony joined the military. He will later tell his story in Confidential magazine, breaking Stanwyck's preeminence for privacy. Their ties were completely broken. It's believed that Tony Dion Fay passed away in Van Nuys, California on May the 17th, 2006 at the age of 74. In 1937, when Tony was 5 years old and still at home with his mother, Barbara was starring with John Bowles in Stella Dallas. Stanwyck plays a mother willing to sacrifice her own happiness to ensure her daughter is happy and will never know about her mother's sacrifice. The final scene is considered the most bittersweet scene in the film history. Barbara Stanwyck will be nominated for the Academy Award for her portrayal of Stella Dallas. Also in 1937, Barbara, along with her close friends Zeppo and Marion Marks, bought several acres in the San Fernando Valley. They built nearby homes with intentions of raising thoroughbreds and stabling horses. They named the ranch Marwick after Marion and Stanwyck. This is the barn and stables of Marwick. Barbara thought that the ranch would be a good place to raise Dion, and she said she had true contentment at the ranch, probably because she had met Robert Taylor the year before on a blind date. Her friends, the Markses, took her to the popular Trocadero nightclub to meet a friend of theirs. Robert nor Barbara knew who they were meeting. She liked him right off. He seemed to love having fun, something that I never grew up with, she said, too busy staying alive. They started seeing each other, and he soon moved in with her at the Marwick Ranch. They will live together for the next 3 years. During this time, they will make 2 movies together. First, The Brother's Wife in 1936.
Chris, aren't you going to kiss me?
You're my brother's wife, Rita. I wouldn't even hold your hand while that condition exists.
But you want to, don't you?
No, I came up here to see what kind of a hat you were wearing.
And This Is My Affair in 1937.
Came up was pretending you loved me.
It's not true. I do love you. At first, maybe I tried not to, but I do.
You lied once. How do I know you aren't still lying?
Darling, you've got to believe me.
You used me to get Bat and Jock.
No, it wasn't Bat and Jock so much. It was the man behind them.
Well, don't you know who he is yet?
Yes, I know.
On May the 14th, 1939, Barbara and Robert secretly drove to San Diego to get married. The matron of honor was Marion Marks, whose husband Zeppo was Barbara's agent and had introduced the two. The couple used their real names, Ruby Catherine Stevens and Sprangler Arlington Brush. 2 months after her getting married, Stanwyck was starred with newcomer William Holden in The Golden Boy. The movie has Holden playing a violinist who tries boxing to make extra money. When he decides to quit the ring and go back to music, his manager sent his wife, played by Stanwyck, to change his mind.
I'm not a bad guy, Lorna. All right, I'm crude. Sometimes I'm worried and I'm crude. Don't we both want that sun to come up and shine on us? Don't we?
Yeah,
That sounds like the girl I used to know.
I see what you mean.
You're not mad.
No, I'm not mad.
This will be Holden's first leading role and will jumpstart his career. The producers of the show didn't want Holden for the part at first, but Stanwyck stood up for him, and he never forgot her kindness. At the 1978 Oscars, where Holden and Stanwyck were presenting awards, Holden stopped the procedures to thank Barbara and said, "If it wasn't for this kind and generous lady, I wouldn't be here tonight." Also in 1939, Barbara was starred with her good friend Joel McCrea in Union Pacific. directed by Cecil B. DeMille. The story is about the building of the Union Pacific Railroad across the West. The movie recreated the real building of the railroad in the 1860s, even using the same 1869 gold spike on loan from Stanford University. In 1941, Stanwyck will be in The Lady Eve with Henry Fonda. Barbara plays a con artist teamed up with her dad, Charles Coburn's character, that set out to take money from the rich but naive Henry Fonda. Things got complicated when she fell in love with her Mark. How does she protect her love and not let her daddy know? In 1944, Barbara and Robert grew tired of the long commute from her ranch in Northridge to the studios in Hollywood. She sold her Marwick farm to comedian Jack Oakey. He renamed the property Oak Ridge Estates, located at 18650 Devonshire Northridge. Now this is the way it looked in 1941. It shows Barbara and the Marks' home with only grass fields surrounding the ranch. Here it is now, with thousands of homes surrounding Marwick. In 1942, she will again star with Joel McCrea in The Great Man's Lady. It tells the story of a pioneer woman whose husband helped build the West. The movie was filmed mostly on Joel McCrea's ranch at Thousand Oaks, California. In 1944, Stanwyck will win her third Oscar nomination. She'll star with Fred McMurray, who plays an insurance salesman who became involved in a plot with his client's wife to murder her husband and make it appear like an accident so that they could collect double indemnity. Stanwyck was first reluctant to play such a cold-hearted killer. She did it as a favor to director Billy Wilder. Billy had Stanwyck wearing a phony-looking wig in the show. The studio said, "We hired Barbara Stanwyck and we got George Washington." It was said of Barbara that there was only two things that she cared about, and both of them was work. It paid off because in 1944, Stanwyck was recognized as making more money than any woman in America. In 1948, she'll be in Sorry, Wrong Number. It will earn her her fourth and final Oscar nomination. Stanwyck played as Leona, a spoiled, wealthy invalid, alone in her apartment, waiting for her husband, played by Burt Lancaster. She tried to call him. When wires got crossed, she heard someone plotting a murder. She can't reach him, so she informed the police what she had heard. They ignored her information. She later learns that the murder plot involves her. Stanwyck filmed the bedroom scenes in chronological order to increase the suspense.
Police don't know. Find if they get me. They'll know. They'll find out tomorrow.
On February the 1st, 1952, Barbara and Robert Taylor divorced. He was having an affair with Italian actress Ursula Thres. When the affair went public, he asked for a divorce. Barbara was awarded their house at 273 South Beverly Glen Boulevard and 15% of his future earnings, provided she never married again. Stanwyck through the years said he was her one true love. She said after 12 years of marriage and you lose someone, it hurts. But to Bob I owe an eternal debt, she said, for he taught me how to have fun in life that I'd never known before. Robert Taylor will marry Ursula Thres on May the 23rd, 1954 in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They'll have 2 kids, Terry in 1955 and Tessa in 1959. They'll remain married until his death on June 8, 1969, at the age of 57. Robert was hospitalized several times in the last few months with lung cancer that took his life. Before Robert's death, his wife Ursula invited Barbara over to see him. She knew how much it meant to her. Stanwyck loved doing westerns and considered herself a western actress. In 1954, she starred with Ronald Reagan in The Cattle Queen of Montana. The movie was filmed in Glacier National Park and the Iverson Ranch in Los Angeles. The picture followed a Montana woman that battles renegades and greedy landowners.
Gord wants to make you a proposition.
What kind of a proposition?
He'll pay top market price cash for every head of beef you've got. Then you and the old-timer can go back to Texas.
Get off my land!
The movie loosely follows the escapades of the real Montana cattle queen, a woman by the name of Margaret Carleton. In 1953, Barbara will be a passenger on the fatal voyage of the Titanic. During filming, she met 22-year-old Robert Wagner. Although Stanwyck was 45, she starts a 4-year romance with Wagner. She said while filming that she was in a boat 50 feet above churning water, thinking to herself, if one of these cables breaks, I'll die. Then when I looked up and saw all those people left behind, it seemed so real I was reacting to a real tragedy, and I began crying and couldn't stop. In 1957, she, along with Barry Sullivan, will star in 40 Guns, which Stanwyck is a cattle rancher that has 40 gunmen helping her to run the ranch. Barry Sullivan is a lawman looking for one of her gunmen. There's one scene where Barbara's character is supposed to be thrown from her horse and dragged when her foot is caught in the stirrup. All this during a storm. It was so dangerous that the stunt woman refused to do the scene. The 50-year-old Stanwyck did the scene herself. Not only once, but twice. In 1960, Barbara will try her hand on the small screen with the Barbara Stanwyck Show on NBC from September 1960 until September 1961. Barbara served as host and will also star in the episodes. She won the Emmy in 1961 for Outstanding Performance by an Actress in a Series.
Thank you very, very much, ladies and gentlemen. To all the ladies and gentlemen of the Academy, I am very, very grateful. To my beloved producer, Lou Edelman, my little Kooky, I love you so much. To Mr. William Wright, all those behind the scenes, without them, this wouldn't be possible, believe me. I thank them all. God bless you.
In 1962, Barbara was living here at 1017 Beverly Hills in Los Angeles. In 1964, Barbara lost her brother Brian to a heart attack at the age of 59. He had become an actor, mostly in supporting roles. He was in 2 of Barbara's movies. Also in 1964, Stanwyck will star in her final film role, The Night Walker. To complicate things, her co-star was Robert Taylor, her ex-husband. They had been divorced for 12 years and Robert had remarried. Knowing the situation, the director asked if they had any objections working together. Taylor said, "It's all right with me if it's all right with Missy." Stanwyck said, "Of course there's no objections, but you better ask Mr. and Mrs. Taylor." When they asked Ursula, Robert's wife, she said, "Not necessarily."
Isn't this romantic? We're here together. Just the 2 of us. Alone late at night. Do you want to kiss me, darling?
The next year, in 1965, Barbara was living at 8076 Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills when she was offered a part as Victoria Barkley, the matriarch of the hugely wealthy Barkley Ranch, on a 1-hour ABC weekly television series entitled The Big Valley. The series was loosely based on the Hill Ranch that existed from 1855 until 1931 close to Stockton, California. The 30,000-acre ranch was owned by Lawson Hill, who was murdered in 1861, and his wife, Euphemia, became the matriarch. She had 3 sons and 1 daughter. The ranch is now covered by the Comanche Reservoir. Although the Big Valley was set near the city of Stockton, it was actually filmed at the Wildwood Regional Park in Thousand Oaks, California, and the Old Republic back lot in Studio City. Stanwyck will win the Emmy for Best Actress in a Drama Series in 1966 for her portrayal of Victoria Barkley. She'll be nominated in 67 and 68 for the same award. Actor Richard Long was picked to play Jared Barkley, Victoria's oldest son, who served as the family attorney and the most sensible one of the boys. Richard was 38 and already a well-established actor when he took the role of Jared. Long got his break in show business when he was cast as Claudette Colbert's son in Tomorrow is Forever. He said, "I was young and scared, but Ms. Colbert was kind and helped me through. I just got out of high school when I started acting," he said. "I had no plans to be an actor, but took a drama course in my senior year at Hollywood High School. I thought it'd be an easy course, and I needed it to get my English requirements." He said 2 girls in his class was walking home when it started raining and given a ride by Jack Merton, casting director at International Studios. When he asked what was happening in the drama department, they told him about this good-looking guy named Richard Long. Martin gave him his business card and said, "Have him give me a call." When the girls learned a week later that Richard still hadn't called because he thought it was a joke, until they convinced him different. In 1953, Richard met 20-year-old actress Susan Ball. The couple had planned to marry when doctors discovered cancerous tumors in her leg. They had to amputate and thought it would take care of the problem. They was wrong. The cancer came back in a fury. They continued their wedding plans, and Susan walked down the aisle on an artificial leg. Richard and the doctor kept the news from Susan as long as they could, telling her that the symptoms was from something else, but finally had to tell her. Susan passed away on April the 5th, 1955, one day after celebrating their first-year anniversary. 2 years after Susan's death, Richard marries actress and model Marie Corday. Their marriage was rocky from the start. Richard, as a youngster, had caught pneumonia, and it damaged his heart that will cause him problems for the rest of his life. The day he was supposed to be in court for his divorce, he ended up in the hospital with a heart attack. Mara said she attempted dozens of times trying to divorce him, but he pleaded on his hands and knees. "I would get lawyers and everything. He sometimes got a little rough, but I always forgive him." She said, "I loved him, and I'm still in love with him all these years after his death." Richard and Mara had 2 sons and 1 girl. Carrie, born 1957, Gregory, born 1960, Valerie, born 1958. 5 years after the Big Valley ended in December 1974, Richard was taken to Tarzan Medical Center in Los Angeles to be treated for heart problems. On the 21st, Richard Long passed away from a major heart attack at the age of 47. The studio picked Joseph Peter Brick to play the second son, Nick Barkley. Nick was the hothead of the family and would often take offense when anyone else said anything about the Barkleys. His siblings were always trying to keep Nick from losing his temper and getting into fights. Nick was known to be a fast gun on the show as well as real life. He was actually the fastest draw of all Western actors. Peter had been a fan of Barbara Stanwyck's since a young boy. They became close on the set of Big Valley, and they will remain friends the rest of her life. Peter Brick will be raised by his grandparents when his parents divorced when he was 8 years old. Peter will later go to live with his dad, Joe Brick, a jazz musician that traveled a lot. Peter's younger brother, George, went to live with his mother, resulting in a decade separation. Brick will play professional baseball for Rochester Royals in 1948 and 49 season. He worked as a ranch hand while attending drama studies at the University of Houston. He went on to debut in his first film, The Beatniks, in 1958. 2 years later, in 1960, Peter married Dion Bordney, a dancer. They will remain married for 51 years until his death. They'll have one son, Christopher, born 1962. Unfortunately, Christopher passed away at the age of 30 from leukemia. In 1980, Peter and Diane moved to Vancouver, British Columbia. In his last year, Peter was plagued by dementia, and in January 2012, he was hospitalized. Within a month, on the 6th of February, Joseph Peter Brick passed away from dementia at the age of 82. Actress Linda Evans was picked for the part of Audrey Barkley. Audrey was the only girl in the Barkley family. Her character was somewhat immature, bold, and holds her own among the three rough and ready boys. Linda had took acting courses while attending Hollywood High School. Her first acting job was on TV show Bachelor Father with John Forsythe. While working on Big Valley, Linda's mother passed away, and she was devastated. Barbara Stanwyck came to the rescue of the 23-year-old actress. She told Evans, "I can't replace your mom, but I'll be your mom from now." From then on, Linda referred to Stanwyck as Mom. They even had homes close to each other. In 1968, while playing on the Big Valley, Linda and actor John Derrick eloped to Mexico and married. They took along John Derrick's daughter from a previous marriage. John was trying to change his acting into a director, so money was scarce for Derrick during this changeover. Linda made his alimony and child payments during this period. In 1973, John Derrick was filming a movie in the Greek islands called The Fantasies. He had tested a 16-year-old girl for a part. Linda took the young girl under her wings as she had never acted before. On Christmas Day 1973, John Derrick announced to Linda that he was in love with the young actress, the future Bo Derrick. Evans returned home and filed for divorce. John and Bo will stay in Europe until she's 18, then return home and marry. They will remain married until his death in 1998, at the age of 71 from heart trouble. 1 year after her divorce from John Derrick, Linda will marry actor Stan Herman. He was also a Beverly Hills realtor. 4 years after she married Stan Herman, in 1979, she divorced him because he had a fling with a model and actress, Claudette Jennings. who died shortly after on the 3rd of October, 1979 from an automobile crash on the Pacific Highway near Malibu. 2 years after divorcing Stan, her agent called and said, "I have a script for you. It's called Oil." They later changed the name to Dynasty. Dynasty will run from 1981 until 1989. Linda will play Crystal Carrington with her friend John Forsythe. Barbara Stanwyck even guest starred on the show. Linda still called her mom. After Dynasty, she'll retire and move to Washington State. She later said that Dynasty was so successful that she was always working. But had she known that it would close the next year, she would have stayed on. After retiring, she was no longer looking for work. But all that changed in 2019 when Evans read a script she liked called Swan Song. She's now back a working actress. To round out the Barkley family, some 400 actors tried out for the role of Heath Barkley, half-brother to Jared, Nick, and Audria. It was Barbara Stanwyck that picked out Majors for the role of Heath. Harvey Lee Urey III started his acting career as Lee Majors at the age of 25. His first role was Straight Jacket in 1964 as Joan Crawford's cheating husband. The next year, in 1965, Lee appeared in Gunsmoke. That same year, he tried out for Big Valley. Young Lee started out as an orphan, yet he didn't know it until a teenager. Lee's dad, Carl Urey, was accidentally killed while working on a job before his son was born. And before Lee was 2 years old, he lost his mother Alice from an automobile accident. He was then adopted by his paternal uncle, Harvey and Mildred Urey, and raised in Middlesboro, Kentucky. He found out he was adopted when he was a teenager by reading old newspaper clippings while piffering through the attic. He said after the shock wore off, he was determined to make his adopted parents proud of him. After high school and college, he will end up in California working as a parks and recreation director. There he became acquainted with actors that helped him to get his start in the business. In 1961, Lee will marry his college sweetheart, Kathy Robinson. They met in 1959 and were married on 17 June 1961. On the 8th of April 1962, Lee and Kathy will have a son, Lee Majors II. Lee II will grow up to become an actor. He will appear in 3 episodes of his dad's $6 Million Man. 2 years after their son was born, in 1964, Lee and Kathy Robinson divorced. In 1965, Lee will join the cast of The Big Valley. 4 years later, The Big Valley will close in 1969. On July the 28th, 1973, Majors will marry actress Farrah Fawcett. That same year, he will star in his own TV show on ABC as Colonel Steve Austin in The $6 Million Man. The $6 Million Man will run for 5 years until 1978. The next year, in 1979, Lee and Farrah will separate, but will not divorce until February 16, 1982. In 2009, on June the 25th, Farrah Fawcett Majors will pass away of cancer at the age of 62. 1 year before Lee's official divorce and 2 years after separating from Farrah, Majors will star in another successful TV show, The Fall Guy. He plays a self-defacing stuntman and part-time bunny hunter, Colt Stevens. Majors will be the producer and director. He'll invite his friends and cast members from the Big Valley to appear. The Fall Guy will be on the air for 5 years until 1986. On November the 15th, 1989, 2 years after The Fall Guy, Lee married Playboy centerfold Karen Velez. They will have a daughter, Nikki Lauren Majors. They will also have twin boys, Dane Luke Majors and Trey Cully Majors. Both will become actors. After Karen's divorce from Majors, she'll marry again in 1999 and divorce in 2004. In 2002, Lee married Faith Cross. He had met her in Florida. She was with someone else, and Lee asked him if she was his girlfriend. He said no, and that was all he wanted to hear. They're still together. In 1972, 3 years after the Big Valley, Barbara Stanwyck moved into this house located at 1055 Loma Vista Drive. She will remain here until her death. In 1981, while sleeping at home, around 1 a.m., Barbara was awakened by an intruder, standing in her bedroom door wearing a ski mask. When she turned the bedroom light on, he struck her with a blunt instrument. The intruder demanded her purse and jewelry. She was forced into a closet. When she felt he was gone, the 73-year-old actress called the police and was taken to the hospital. She was released the next day after her head gash was treated. She said she was grateful not to have been physically harmed. The predator was never caught. In 1982, Barbara will co-star in another TV series, The Thornbirds, with Richard Chamberlain. Career, Barbara was in 75 films and several TV series. In 1982, Barbara was presented with an honorary Oscar for her contribution to the film industry. She had been nominated 4 times, but never won. They said of Stanwyck, she was the best actress to never win an Oscar. While accepting the honorary Oscar, she gave a stirring speech about her friend, William Holden, who had recently passed away.
A few years ago, I stood on the stage with William Holden as a presenter. I loved him very much, and I miss him. He always wished that I would get an Oscar. And so tonight, my golden boy, you got your wish.
In 1984, she received the Golden Globe Award for her performance in The Thornbirds. The next year, in 1985, she made several appearances on TV series Dynasty with her close friend Linda Evans. Dynasty was so successful, it was decided to try and capitalize on the success by a spin-off series called The Colbys. Barbara was hired to play the part of Constance Colby Patterson, along with co-star Charlton Heston. Although she had signed to do 6 to 8 episodes on the second season, she managed to break the agreement and said the series was a turkey and the biggest pile of garbage I've ever done. 5 months before going to work on the Colbys, Barbara was living at her longtime home on Loma Vista Drive in Beverly Hills when her fire alarm went off. Barbara had downsized to a 9,000 square foot home with 3 bedrooms and 4 baths. She loved the house, so she had it repaired, even though the damage was estimated to be $1.5 million, mostly in the attic. In 1987, Barbara received the AFI Lifetime Achievement Award. 3 years after receiving the AFI award, actress Barbara Stanwyck, Ruby Catherine Stevens, was rushed to the emergency room at Providence St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica with congestive heart failure. Missy passed away on January the 20th, 1990 at the age of 82. She requested that no services of any kind be performed, that she be cremated and her remains scattered at Long Pine, California, where she made so many of her westerns that she loved.
And I came across so many people who, they gave so much to me of themselves. All along the way, these people have been so wonderful to me. And I have tried, in my own way, to help other people. And it's great fun to do it, believe me. And it's very rewarding when you see the climax. It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling. I love doing it.